Washington, 0207 a.m. A red blip screams across early warning screens. Not an error, not a drill. Within minutes, the president is awake. The Situation Room lit like a warship's bridge. Sirens wail, air defenses spin to life. From Tehran to the Gulf, a missile arc writes a terrible sentence across the sky. A nuclear weapon is coming for America. For the first time since the Cold War, the United States lifts its most secret planes. Aircraft the public has only ever heard about in rumors and declassified footnotes, and sends them into the night to stop the strike, save lives, and, if necessary, answer with a vengeance. This is a simulation of the night the invisible became inevitable. The morning began like any other for air traffic controllers and military watch officers. Routine reports, sleepy eyes, the soft buzz of coffee cups. Then the screen changed. A plume on a satellite feed, little at first, then a growing line of telemetry. At 0154 Eastern, radar operators saw the signature they dread most. A long-range boost phase leaving Iranian territory on a trajectory over the Arctic toward North America. Washington's secure channels lit up in seconds. Analysts parsed the data: velocity, estimated payload class, mid-course burn pattern. The conclusion was raw and unavoidable. This was not a tactical salvo, not a demonstration. It behaved like a strategic missile with a nuclear-class signature. The word nuclear moved through the Situation Room with a chill. The president slid into his seat. Aides closed the doors. Publicly, the administration had always warned of contingencies, but this test would be the test. In classified basements and hardened bunkers, a different playbook existed, one written for the unthinkable. The first move was defensive. Raise interceptors, scramble F-22s, order Aegis ships to engage. But behind the visible fleet lurked something else. Platforms so secret their deployment was a last resort option, reserved for scenarios where visibility could cost millions of lives. The orders came down low and fast. Deploy Tier 1 assets, activate Stormwatch. In the parlance of the Pentagon, Stormwatch was a package. A coordinated set of stealth platforms, infiltration jets, and experimental ECM suites that could blind an adversary's sensors and, crucially, hunt and destroy strategic launch capabilities before re-entry. The public would later learn of them as black programs. In the moment, they were simply the nation's last doorway between survival and catastrophe. At Odas to 12, deep within hangars hidden behind ordinary bases, pilots suited up in silence. These were not just aviators. They were crews trained for a mission between worlds. To chase a missile in its mid-course, to force it into failure modes, to sever the chain that could release a nuclear fireball over American soil. Planes taxis on icy ramps, cloaked in emission controls, slipped into the night under fighter cover as AWACS aircraft painted visual corridors through storm-clear sky. As Stormwatch elements pushed north, airspace over the Atlantic became a lattice of light and shadow. Electronic warfare aircraft fired silent volleys of jamming and deception, painting phantom targets to confuse Iranian tracking. Drones loitered like vultures over shipping lanes, ready to relay telemetry. Space assets, those satellites suddenly so vulnerable, attempted to track and triangulate. The clock ticked down. Tehran's launch had been audacious but not flawless. In the cold geometry of space, a missile's mid-course is vulnerable. A precise nudge to its guidance, an induced spin, a disrupted bus. Stormwatch's charter wasn't to trade city for city. It was to corrupt the missile's brain, like to make it miss, to make it fail. In the hush of encrypted radio, engineers watched streams of data as the secret aircraft closed the gap. Then, the first contact? A burst of telemetry, a flicker on the screen. The missile's bus showed anomalous inputs, its orientation yawing. The test team in a rear compartment exchanged looks. The pilot's voice, terse. "We're in its wake. Emitting now." Onboard countermeasures designed to overload guidance pulsed into life. For a breathless minute, the world held to the heartbeat of machinery. The missile shuddered, then broke its arc. Telemetry indicated a catastrophic failure in its re-entry module. For a suspended second, relief rippled through secure channels. But relief was cautious. An ICBM crippled in flight can still deliver devastation, depending on how and where it fails. The risk calculus shifted. Would the missile burn out harmlessly over the ocean? Or would it fragment into multiple warheads, scattering danger across a wider swath? The next telemetry packet was the worst: fragmentation. Multiple objects appeared on radar, each on divergent trajectories. One vector aimed toward the mid-Atlantic shipping lanes, another arced toward the Canadian Maritimes. And the darkest blip, a high-energy plume bearing down on the Eastern Seaboard. A collective inhalation filled every command center. What followed forced the U.S. hand. Interceptors were already in flight, Aegis crews had redoubled their focus, and the hardened platforms of Stormwatch pivoted from disruption to direct engagement. Dozens of missiles, interceptors, experimental directed energy pulses, cyber pulses against the missile's remaining guidance, engaged in a lethal ballet. For hours, the Eastern Seaboard watched the sky like never before. In the end, one of the fragments, a warhead-class object, was engaged and destroyed over the North Atlantic by an airborne interceptor, its detonation producing a high, contained thermal flash over empty waters. Another piece burned out harmlessly, but a small object, its trajectory imperfectly tracked, continued inbound, its energy signature suggesting it still carried a viable payload and a dangerous heat rate. At 04 Yoau, that fragment vaporized a remote support island in the North Atlantic, an uninhabited monitoring station used by NATO. The blast was conventionally powerful, the shockwave shunted into open water, but it was a terrifying proof. The US and allies had prevented the unthinkable catastrophe from striking a major city, yet they had not averted all harm. The casualty was limited but symbolic, a reminder that the curtain had been pierced. Back in the Situation Room, the president absorbed the data, his face a map of decisions. Defensive success had come at a cost. American citizens were alive where they might have been dead, allies had been saved from annihilation, and yet the world had been shown a new, naked vulnerability. Advanced states could, and might, attempt nuclear coercion from afar. The president turned to his chiefs. The message was short, but its weight heavy. Identify the source nodes. We will hold nothing back. Prepare options. The night's events had shifted the world's center of gravity. The US had used its most secret tools to blunt a strategic strike. It had bought time, maybe even lives. But the retaliation question, whether to punish, to deter, to incapacitate, now sat like a live wire in every leader's palm. The flash of the missile had been the first chapter. The next would define whether containment or escalation would follow. By sunrise, the world was awake and terrified. The headlines were immediate. Iran launches nuclear missile at US. Secret American aircraft save East Coast from obliteration. Across Europe and Asia, markets froze. Leaders convened emergency councils and ordinary people whispered one question. If Iran could do this once, what would stop them from trying again? In Washington, the Situation Room seethed with urgency. Maps of Iran glowed red with potential targets. Intelligence analysts identified the launch site, a hardened silo complex near Semnan, deep inside Iran, disguised for years as a civilian facility. Satellite images showed scorch marks and blast doors still open. American generals leaned forward. We have a window. Strike now and we decapitate their launch capability before the next missile fires. But the president faced a dilemma more dangerous than any battlefield. Retaliation could spiral into regional war, even global war. Yet inaction would embolden adversaries everywhere. The options were brutal, each with world-shaking consequences. Option 1. Conventional strikes. Cruise missiles, bunker-busting bombs, stealth raids against Iran's silos and command bunkers. Clean, precise, but limited. Iran still had mobile launchers, hidden in deserts and mountains. A conventional strike might slow the threat, but it would not eliminate it. Option 2. Full-spectrum retaliation. Deploy nuclear-capable bombers, put ballistic missile subs on red alert, and make clear that any further aggression would be answered in kind. But showing the nuclear card risked pushing the world past a line no one could retreat from. Option 3. The shadows. Deploy America's Black Fleet, aircraft denied in official records, projects whispered of but never confirmed. Platforms that combine stealth, electronic disruption, and direct strike capability against command nodes, buried deep beneath mountains. A mission no one would acknowledge, but one that could cripple Iran's strategic arm without igniting a nuclear firestorm. The debate was fierce. The Secretary of Defense slammed the table. "We cannot show weakness. If we don't retaliate decisively, Moscow and Beijing will smell blood." The National Security Advisor countered, "If we overreach, we hand them the narrative of U.S. aggression. Iran is not Russia. We can't start World War III over one strike." The president listened, silent, eyes locked on the glowing maps. Every tick of the clock was a risk. Intelligence estimated Iran could ready another missile within hours. There was no time for drawn-out diplomacy. A choice had to be made. At 8:37 a.m., the order came. A hybrid of the options, one designed to deliver maximum effect with minimal visibility. The U.S. would activate Operation Iron Dagger, a covert air campaign using its most secret aircraft, supported by conventional strikes, to decapitate Iran's nuclear infrastructure. It would be a ghost strike, fast, silent, deniable, but devastating. In hidden hangars across Nevada, Alaska, and Diego Garcia, the Black Fleet stirred. Triangular silhouettes rolled from bunkers, wings shaped like shadows, surfaces designed to drink radar. Pilots wore unmarked uniforms, their mission briefed in fragments. Target nodes, communications first, then launch sites. Leave nothing recoverable. Meanwhile, conventional forces moved to mask the operation. B-2 bombers lifted visibly, tankers staged across the Atlantic, and carrier groups surged into the Persian Gulf. To the world, America appeared readying a visible show of force. But in the darkness above, the real strike package slipped into the sky, unseen, unheard, and unstoppable. In Tehran, leadership braced for retaliation. Revolutionary Guard commanders declared the nation ready for martyrdom. Anti-air systems switched to full readiness. But Iran's generals didn't know what was coming. They expected tomahawks and carrier jets. They did not expect machines the world still officially denied existed. As dusk fell over the Middle East, radar screens along Iran's borders began to flicker. Static. Ghost signatures. Entire sectors went blind. Commanders shouted, scrambling interceptors, but their screens showed only silence, until the first explosions bloomed across Semnan. Underground silos cracked open like eggshells. Communication nodes fried in showers of sparks. Mobile launchers were reduced to twisted steel under the precision of weapons that seemed to appear from nowhere. Iran's nuclear sword was being cut from its hand, slice by slice, before its leaders even realized the battle had begun. Back in Washington, the president received the first after-action reports. The operation was succeeding. Iran's nuclear arsenal was burning on its launch pads. Yet his face did not soften. He knew the truth. Retaliation was not the end. It was the beginning of a new war, one that might spread beyond Tehran, beyond the Middle East, and across the globe. For tonight, America had struck back. Tomorrow, the world would decide whether it had stepped back from the edge or been shoved closer to the abyss. The first explosions in Semnan were only the beginning. As Operation Iron Dagger unfolded, Iranian command realized its worst nightmare. America's invisible hand was striking deep inside the homeland. Missile silos collapsed into fireballs, radar stations went dark, and hardened bunkers lost communications in seconds. The Revolutionary Guard scrambled interceptors into the night sky, but their radars painted ghosts. Pilots reported chasing phantom signatures only to find empty skies. Panic spread through command channels. In Tehran, sirens wailed as leadership gathered in underground chambers. The supreme leader was defiant. "We will not surrender. If the Americans want war, they will drown in it." Orders flashed across the network. Unleash every asset left. Iran's retaliation was swift and ferocious. Hundreds of drones, cheap but deadly, lifted off from coastal bases and desert strips. Swarms buzzed across the Persian Gulf like locusts, diving at U.S. ships and bases in Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar. Cruise missiles roared from mobile launchers, hidden in mountain caves, streaking toward oil refineries, air bases, and even Tel Aviv. Iran's network of militias, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Houthis in Yemen, proxy cells in Iraq, launched rockets and artillery in a coordinated wave. The Middle East lit up like a bonfire. In the Persian Gulf, the U.S. Fifth Fleet braced for impact. Aegis destroyers fired interceptor missiles in rapid volleys, their decks glowing with heat as wave after wave of drones and missiles slammed into defenses. One frigate, the USS Mason, took a direct hit from a suicide drone, its deck engulfed in flames. Carriers scrambled F-35s to thin the swarms, but the sheer numbers overwhelmed defenses. On land, U.S. bases came under fire. In Bahrain, Marines sheltered in bunkers as explosions ripped through fuel depots. In Kuwait, Patriot systems tracked and intercepted incoming ballistic missiles, their contrails streaking the dawn sky. In Israel, Iron Dome batteries lit the heavens as Hezbollah rockets rained down from Lebanon. The entire region was now at war. Washington raised the stakes. Strategic bombers lifted from Diego Garcia and Europe, their bays packed with precision-guided munitions. B-2s and B-21s pierced Iranian airspace, striking command bunkers and weapons factories. At the same time, the Black Fleet continued its silent work, hunting mobile launchers across deserts with uncanny precision. Explosions dotted Iran's heartland as one launcher after another vanished in fire. But Iran refused to bow. Revolutionary Guard commanders ordered a strike on U.S. soil through unconventional means. Cyber units unleashed malware against American banks and infrastructure, triggering blackouts in Houston and Miami. Sleeper cells attempted attacks on embassies and airports. Panic flickered back home. After a nuclear missile attempt, Americans now feared bombs in their own cities. The world teetered. Russia denounced the U.S. campaign as imperialist aggression and hinted at sending air defense systems to Iran. China, alarmed at the spiraling crisis, deployed naval units to the Indian Ocean for security operations. NATO fractured. Some allies pledged support, others urged restraint. The United Nations called for an immediate ceasefire, but the battlefield ignored diplomacy. In the Gulf of Oman, one of the war's most decisive clashes unfolded. Iranian missile boats swarmed a U.S. carrier strike group, launching volleys of cruise missiles. American F-A-18s screamed overhead, while destroyers fired defensive salvos. The sea turned into a furnace of explosions, burning wrecks and sinking hulls. Yet amidst the chaos, U.S. submarines struck back, launching tomahawks into Iran's naval bases. By sunrise, large portions of Iran's navy lay in ruins. For ordinary Iranians, the retaliation storm was apocalyptic. Cities shuddered as airstrikes pounded infrastructure. Power grids collapsed, water supplies faltered, and hospitals overflowed. Civilians huddled in basements as jets howled overhead. Yet state television broadcast defiance, insisting Iran was winning the holy war. Inside the Situation Room, American generals updated the president. Iran's nuclear capability was crippled, its air force battered, and its navy shattered. But the cost was immense. U.S. ships burned in the Gulf. Bases reeled from missile impacts. Allies begged for stability, and the threat of escalation, Russia stepping in, Israel opening a wider front, or Iran attempting one final desperate strike, loomed larger than ever. The storm had broken, but it had not passed. Both nations stood bloodied yet unyielding. The question now was not whether retaliation had succeeded, but how close the world now stood to a war no one could control. By the 8th day, the fury began to burn itself out. Iran's skies, once thick with missiles and drones, now lay eerily quiet. Its navy was shattered, its air force grounded, and its nuclear launch sites reduced to twisted craters. The Black Fleet had done its work. American bombers had finished the job. But the cost was staggering. Entire neighborhoods of Tehran lay in ruins. Fuel depots and factories smoldered. Hospitals struggled with waves of casualties. Millions were displaced, fleeing cities for villages, seeking refuge from the relentless airstrikes. For the Iranian people, the retaliation storm had left scars that would last generations. In Washington, the Situation Room felt no triumph. The president's advisors spoke in clipped, exhausted tones. Iran's nuclear capability has been neutralized. Their command structure is fractured. We've achieved our military objectives, one general said. But another voice cut through. We may have won the war, but we have unleashed a storm that will reshape the world. The geopolitical shockwaves were immediate. Russia condemned the U.S. strikes as barbaric and moved more submarines into the Mediterranean. China denounced Washington's reckless escalation and began urgent military exercises in the South China Sea. NATO itself was shaken. Some allies praised America's resolve, while others feared they had been dragged toward Armageddon without warning. In the Middle East, the fallout was worse. Hezbollah and Iranian-backed militias vowed revenge, declaring 1,000 small wars against American forces in the region. Israel, having survived the rocket barrages, prepared for wider confrontation, mobilizing its reserves. Saudi Arabia and the Gulf monarchies quietly celebrated Iran's humiliation, but braced for reprisals on their soil. The entire region teetered on the edge of a wider conflagration. Back in the United States, relief and fear mixed uneasily. Americans celebrated that the nuclear strike had been stopped. Cities like New York and Washington still stood. But footage of burning U.S. warships in the Gulf, of Marines under fire in bases, and of coffins returning home sparked bitter debate. Was the cost worth it? Had America won a war or merely survived one night of terror? For Iran, the official line was defiance. State television declared victory through resistance, even as its infrastructure lay in ruins. The supreme leader promised vengeance would come in time, vowing that Iran would rebuild stronger. Yet in private, commanders admitted what the people already knew. The country's nuclear arm had been amputated, its military crippled, its economy shattered. Iran had survived, but it was no longer a contender. And then came the diplomatic scramble. Back-channel talks through neutral states pushed both sides to halt the cycle of escalation. Europe demanded negotiations. The United Nations proposed sanctions relief in exchange for permanent dismantling of Iran's nuclear program. For once, even Moscow and Beijing urged restraint, fearing the war might spill beyond the Middle East. By the third week, a ceasefire of necessity, not agreement, emerged. U.S. bombers returned to their bases. Iran's skies cleared of drones. The Black Fleet slipped back into its hangars, its existence once more reduced to rumor and whispers. The war was not declared over, but the fighting had paused. The resolution was fragile. America had proven its power in intercepting a nuclear strike, unleashing secret aircraft, and crippling a hostile state in days. Yet it had also revealed its vulnerability. A single missile launch had brought the world to the brink of annihilation. Every rival power took note. Every ally asked the same quiet question: if it could happen once, what about next time? For the Iranian people, the cost was survival through devastation. For America, the cost was a glimpse into its own fragility. For the world, the cost was a reminder that nuclear war was no longer a relic of the Cold War. It was a nightmare that could return any night. The war had ended not with victory parades, but with a terrifying lesson. The line between survival and extinction is as thin as a radar blip on a midnight screen. Disclaimer: this video is a fictional simulation. It does not depict real events. It imagines how such a conflict could unfold and what consequences it might bring for the world.